for banks to succeed over the next 5 years, they need to be listening to the customer, because it's too easy to change, and there's too many hungry and incredibly talented people in organisations that are coming after them.
Your call centre and voice of customer programs are the heartbeat of your company, and when you truly understand your customers' needs, greater efficiencies and improvements can be made across the board. But with so many interactions, it is hard to get clarity quickly, and problems can fester without being resolved. Implementing feedback analytics processes can fast-track learnings and monitor improvements when you implement change. Our guest this episode is Rob Windle, CEO and founder of Dynamic Customer Solutions, and the core of his business revolves around implementation and supporting businesses to lower the cost of call center operations while improving quality of outcomes, and supporting learning and improvements through data-driven metrics using state-of-the-art feedback analytics software to fast-track improvements. Welcome, Rob. So good to have you here on the Touchpoints podcast. It's been a pleasure with Touchpoint Group working with you over the last year or so, and we thought only fitting to have you come on and talk about the wealth of experience that you've got in and around CX, dealing with large enterprise companies and how it all comes together with data. So we always start these things off with, give us the 2 to 4 minute life story. But first of all, welcome. Great to see you.
Thanks.
How are things in the UK?
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. No, it's great to be here at the end of a fairly interesting year, as I'm sure everyone has suffered from. But it's been great working with you guys over this last year. So yeah, very pleased to be here.
Yeah. So I know you've got an incredible and varied background. Everything from investments to Barclays to financial security and now DCS. Give us the lowdown. Give us the rundown of how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I've always been connected in some way to the customer, and it's been a lot about creating a more efficient journey for the customer and providing what the customer really needs or wants, and those two things aren't always the same.
Mm-hmm.
But I started off in the asset management business, looking at new products and services for them. Lots of sort of new innovation in the industry at that time, and building that out. And I then moved on to Barclays to do a big communications role around a new tax change, which affected all of their clients and customers. But that change across the bank, you really saw the impact of technology on customers. It's a real challenge to get transformation that's going to affect every single customer right, and it's so important to get it right. I then moved on to work with a brilliant consultancy that does financial crime prevention. It's important to put the prevention in there. They worked with both very big wholesale banks, but also some of the new challenger banks that have become household names now, and very similar problems for very different reasons. But it's dealing with huge amounts of customer data and requirements as efficiently as possible, but also making it a good experience for customers. And that change in particularly in financial services that we've seen over the last few years, with the emergence of these new digital banks, has really shaken things up for the customer in a really good way. But it has also changed it for the traditional banks as well, and some of them have come back fighting hard. I set up DCS to try and help with that customer engagement and improving the customer experience. to make sure that companies are focusing in the right area, and to embrace the sort of innovative new technology and opportunities that are now available, such as the services offered by Touchpoint, in order to engage with their customers like they've never been able to do before, and to really use that data to make the experience better for the customer, and for the organisation itself. So yeah. I've seen it done well, and I've seen it done badly.
I bet you have. And let's jump to DCS in a minute, but I'm sure it is something that is absolutely fascinating for a lot of people when it comes to financial crime prevention. So like your time with Official Frontiers International, going through that, it's well documented, there is just, the internet is rife with scams, money laundering, all sorts of different things. How does technology now play a part in that? Because I suppose it's like emails. There are more emails sent every day than the internet can almost bloom and cope with, and the vast majority of those spam and scam. And then we move up to the more sophisticated level, which I'm sure that you guys were involved in. What was the deal there? And because it's something that plays such a massive impact on the end consumer, knowing that what they are doing is being protected.
Yeah, it's I mean, I think there's two sides to it. There's the very rudimentary financial crime that's carried out by just mass attacks of people trying their luck. Yep. On one side, and technology has become very good at both. Well, they've used technology for that, to push these scams, hiding who the email is from and so on. Mm-hmm. But technology has also been developed to address that as well. And there's fantastic technology, but it's a constant battle of trying to stay one step ahead of financial criminals in order to do that. And then the other side is the incredibly sophisticated, and sadly these are not very ethical, but very, very bright people that are using tremendous resources to abuse the financial system. And it's up to the banks to have these processes and policies and procedures in place, and try and make those operate as efficiently as possible, because we don't have the resources to fight that without adopting technology solutions,
for sure,
and operational efficiency.
And how much does compliance come into play these days with data and banks?
It's so, but I mean, all banks are regulated industries. Yep. I mean, DCS focuses on regulated industries, such as financial services and utilities, because that provides a framework to look after the customer. Mm-hmm. And certainly from our perspective, this is not just a nice to have. If you get this wrong, then and we've seen banks with billions of pounds of fines because they haven't been following the processes correctly. And there's a huge job to put those right. On the other side of that, there's a huge job to make sure that you're looking after your bona fide customers well and appropriately, while trying to close the door on the nefarious elements.
So I imagine it's quite a balancing act for those in the finance industry between time, energy, and resource, and how to do it efficiently, with all that all-consuming need for compliance, but also knowing that unless they have more of a customer-centric approach to looking after their customers, that they'll end up with churn.
Yeah, and there's always that that balance between or the comparison that you have with compliance on one side and the business teams on the other that are desperate to try and push the deals through and so on, and compliance and in a really customer friendly way to make it smooth and efficient for them, and compliance who are putting all of these checks and blocks in place for regulatory reasons and to keep their customers safe, but trying to keep customers safe and trying to keep the customer journey as smooth as possible are two things that do not go hand in hand.
No, we know that very well. And look, you and I, we're both at the forefront of this when it comes to what sort of technology banks can choose to utilize to capture, understand, and enhance the user journey. But all of those investment decisions need to be backed up with data, because they're millions of dollars in certain circumstances to get that better understanding of the customer. So how is it that you decided to choose to work in this area and around, because it does fascinate me, is the visualization of data, because all the data in the world is not going to help you if you can't tell a simple story with it.
Yeah, and that's it exactly. I mean, nowadays, no company can really say that they don't have the data available to them. There is more data than most companies can analyze. And we've spoken to companies, large organizations that have teams of 50 people to analyze this data for them. But it's my belief that is not a very efficient way of doing this, and that is where technology can come in to really make a difference. Mm-hmm. It's about pushing people further up the value curve. No analyst adds any value to the process by preparing the data. They add the real value when they're analysing that data. They've got it into the format that they want it, and then they say, what is this data telling me? Yeah. Now, the more efficiently and to greater depth that they can do that means that they can create a more complete picture. If you're hamstrung by not having enough time or resource to analyze all of your data sources or all your potential data sources, and so you just focus on a select few, then you can miss key pieces of insight that would recommend the direction that you should be taking your investment in. Should you be investing in a new functionality for your app? And if you're going to, then which out of all of the possibilities that you've got, which one should you be focusing on? Now, finding out real data to back up that decision makes that much less of a gamble. Mm-hmm. But in order for companies to be able to do that effectively, they want to be able to analyze all of the data that's available to them.
And there's, more often than not, there are tens of hundreds or millions of thousands of millions of lines of data that can be analyzed to do that. And it's not necessarily the most efficient way of manual and how that data is then visualized. Coming back to a point that you just made too, and I think it's really critically important than what you said there, and around the best use of that analyst's time is not to go through the screens of data, it's to look at some of the analyses that's coming through to turn that into valuable insights. But I think just as importantly, those people that they're doing the analysis for, they don't necessarily just want the insights, do they? They want, give us the 3 things that we need to do.
Yeah.
And tell me why.
that's what it boils down to. There's once you've got that data and you've analysed that data, you've also got to visualise that for your stakeholders, and your stakeholders will have there will be different uses for that data. You need to work with your stakeholders to ensure that you're presenting that data in the most effective way possible, because that's when you will get the message that the data is trying to tell you across. There's and this comes down to individuals as well. Everyone's individual, and some people love tables, and they like columns of numbers, because that's how their brain works. Other people like shapes and colors. Now, if you can manipulate that the visualization of that data more easily, then you can provide the right view of that data at the right level of granularity to the specific stakeholder that it's designed for.
Yeah, for sure. What would you say to those people that are worried that AI and software are trying to take the place of analysts?
I think that's a bit like saying that you've got a that's like saying, here's a great tool, but this is taking the place of the workman. It's not. It's making that workman more effective. I don't think that the interpretation of the data, there isn't AI software out there that is sophisticated enough to tell you what 3 things you should be doing, because there are so many different variables to that. What's possible in the organization, what the cost of doing these would be, what the regulatory framework is. I mean, take banking for an example. As an example, you go through the customer feedback that you collect for banks, and lots of it talks about having accounts frozen, and not telling your customers why you've frozen their accounts. Now, those are anti-money laundering regulations. You're not allowed to tell them that's classed as tipping off. So you can't tell them why you've frozen their account. Incredibly frustrating for the customer. But the bank can't turn around and say, "Oh, well, that's fine. Well, we'll just tell them why we've done it." Unfortunately, there's suspicion on their account. Now, that's not the case. That's not always the case. There may be a technical issue why it's the account's been frozen, but there are issues like that an AI piece of software would say, "Well, just fix this," and that's a problem that can't be fixed.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you're saying is all of these tools are really just moving the analyst up in the value chain, because they can do more faster and give better insights and better recommendations.
Yeah, I mean, if you take, you're looking at customer feedback, and you've got 100,000 reviews that you want to analyse to see whether a customer likes your mobile app or not, and where you sit compared to your competitors. Now, you can have an analyst go through that and try and work out everything that you might want to find, and then analyze that data to pull out that insight. Or you can have a tool that automatically filters that data for you, and allows you to slice and dice the views of that data, with a couple of clicks of the button. That means that your analyst can sit there thinking, okay, so I want to have a look at security. Let's have a look at everything that's to do with security. Okay, there seems to be an issue here with biometrics. Let me drill down into that. I wonder how many of our customers have been talking about biometrics. Let's have a look at the frequency of that. Okay, well, now let's have a look at the frequency of that over the last 6 months. Has it changed at all? Now, that's something that would take an analyst using spreadsheets and with just giving this data, it would take them weeks to do. using a tool like Epiphany, that's automatically set up, and you can just run through those analyses.
Yeah.
You can have a look and say, this isn't quite right. How can I change this? Can I shift this view to see, what impact is this having? That means that they can spend all their time actually analysing the data, not spending their time preparing their data to then analyse it.
Yeah, and we've definitely seen that here at Touchpoint, especially since the last 5 years of working on Epiphany, with that time for analyses has gone from, in some cases, months down to weeks, down to days. For most companies, it's days to weeks now, I think, that we're seeing, even with some voice of customer platforms that they've got access to. It's great at collating the data, not necessarily analyzing and interpreting the data, and then overlaying something like Epiphany is taken it from days to, in some cases, minutes, which is just crazy to think. Then the impact that can have on an organization when they are proactively utilizing these tools moving forward, and the changes that they can make, and how that they can then monitor the impact of the changes that they're having, rather than a quarterly review.
Yeah, there's always a trade-off between the amount of time you spend preparing the data to get it just right for doing the analysis, and then the amount of analysis you do. You want to get that data into the best format possible. Now, one of the big things with customer feedback is that the more detail you ask them for, the fewer people will respond to that request for feedback. So, in an ideal world, you want to ask them a questionnaire with 100 different questions in it. But if you send that out to customers, the only customers or the sample that you get back is only going to be customers that are prepared to sit there and answer a 100-question questionnaire. What you want to do is ask as broad a possible audience, and then have some way of categorizing that down into the 100 different things that your categories that you're looking for automatically.
So do you see that as a real benefit in regards to analyzing publicly available data, like the reviews in the app stores and Trustpilots and things like that, where people aren't necessarily prompted based on a specific part of their journey? It's at that point of their journey, they have decided to give some feedback and a rating. And because there are so many people doing that, it is unstructured, so it must be harder to analyze because you haven't necessarily got the framework. But I suppose is that not where the AI side of things can come in and around semantics and understanding and then categorize?
Yeah, it's that pattern recognition, and it's giving you the ability to go down into a granular level of detail. Now, if you're sitting in a workshop and you're going through something and you say, right, I want to look at every review that has talked about this very small specific idea, you might have 100,000 reviews and only 600 of them have mentioned this, or only 60 of them have mentioned this. But if you've got the ability through AI to pull out those 60 automatically, and those, there may be 20 different ways of talking about the same thing within those 60, but if it can pull all that out, then instead of spending your time trying to look for those 60 reviews, you can actually go through and you can look at all of them, and you can spend your time really analysing the 60 reviews that are talking about the topic or the category that you're really interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And AI is always going to do that better than a human, because it would take a human weeks to go through that, and you would have to do it manually to try and put the topics, which means that you need to think around that topic of every way that could be talked about, and that creating that ontology is something that takes years. That's not something that you want to do for every new idea that you want to explore.
Yeah. Is more data always better?
I think no. I think that with especially with customer feedback data, you can have that balance between so if you take something like Trustpilot data, then you've just got raw data there and a score. But if you're carrying out the research yourself, then you can ask 2 or 3, hey, what did we do really well, and what didn't we do so well, or what did you like about this part of the process? Now, that doesn't need to be a sort of a 100 question questionnaire, but it will help guide you to be able to look at things that perhaps you've already identified through the raw data. This is something we need to look at. That then gives you more data in order to make the decisions about how to progress that, and where you can really make an impact.
Sure thing. So if you, being the incredible consultant that you are, had any advice for, not just in banking, but in any organization that was looking at implementing customer feedback analytics in their business? And customer feedback analytics is, let's face it, it's a fairly, we'll say, new concept. It's been around for a while, but it's really only just starting to hit that adoption curve now, where more and more businesses are taking notice and trying to implement these programs. What are some of the fundamental things that you think businesses should take into consideration, and maybe 1 or 2 of the traps that you have seen people fall into? Because there's lots of voice of customer programs out there that are great at capturing. And like anything, when it's new and shiny, there is, I believe, there's been a whole lot of overpromise, under-deliver in the market in general. These expectations where this is going to save my business, we're going to smash the world. And then there's the reality of the complexity of what do you do with that once you've got it. So yeah, what are the things that we should consider, and what are some of the pitfalls we should avoid?
Yeah, I think any sort of voice of customer program, so much emphasis is put on collecting the data, that you might congratulate yourself that you've collected all of this data, but that's just the first stage of it, and that's when the hard work starts. And you've got to be very careful how you collect that data to ensure that both you're getting as broad a possible view. You've got the best sort of sample of data that you can, and you can cut out the noise in that data. Once you've got that and you've analysed the data, the biggest pitfall is not producing actionable insights. So insights are either too broad that you can't actually do anything with it, or they are they're not tailored to the stakeholders that are going to use them, and you're not talking to them in their language, and you're not giving them something that they can say, yeah, I understand that. You understand the limitations of what we can do. You've taken that into account, and you're suggesting useful ways to move forward that we can actually implement. The biggest problem is just having a whole great big mass of data and doing some very clever analysis on it without involving the business or the stakeholders that actually need to implement and use that piece of data.
You know what I loved about that is you went right back to the whole 101 of having a customer-centric approach. And we're talking about internal customers, really, isn't it? Is for you to be able to get engagement cut through an action from your customers, you need to be thinking about presenting anything to them in a format that they resonate with.
Yeah. And look at the difference that having a customer-centric approach makes to organisations. I mean, financial services is a prime example of this, and with going right back to Metro Bank being the first new bank for over 130 years, they started opening branches, at the weekends and in evenings, because that's when people wanted them. Whereas the traditional banks are like, well, we open 9 to 5 and we're shut on bank holidays, and we certainly don't open at weekends because we're not on weekends.
And we've got a 12 till 2 lunch break at the pub.
Yeah, and exactly, yeah, and then you had the emergence of the digital banks, which embraced technology, and this system is broken. This is not looking after the customer as it should. And so there was a sea change in the industry, but you had these great big oil tankers of organisations, of the big traditional banks, and then you had these little speedboats of the that very, very manoeuvrable to come in and shake things up for the customer. And it's taken time for these large oil tankers to change direction. But you can't argue that they haven't come back fighting with this. And you look at the reviews and so on that the digital offerings for some of the banks have received now, and they are consistently scoring among the highest, even beating the digital banks. And you have a very different. You take a small digital bank, it has one platform, and transformation can be done over a weekend. So the possibilities for what they can do with customer insight are much, much faster. Taking one of the old traditional banks, they're not just one bank. They've been around for 200 years, and there's been mergers and acquisitions, and it's like a whole bunch of small banks that have been put together, and hundreds of legacy systems and so on. So making any changes there isn't something that can happen overnight. So the idea of taking customer insight and saying, right, okay, working within these parameters, what is it that we can do to really improve things for the customer? Because the traditional banks want to look after the customer, certainly nowadays, and they do it very well. But the way they can really excel at that is by being able to take that customer data and analyze what it is that's really making an impact for the customer.
Great. I've got one final question for you, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. Where do you see the future of banking when it comes to customers and customer centricity?
I think that there's a real change at the moment. It's a great question. I think there's a real change in the industry that started with the emergence of the new digital banks, and I think that I expect to see banking becoming a small part of everything. You see new entrants to the market like Google and Amazon and so on. You see Revolut, which is now in the process of getting its UK banking license, and they are providing a much broader offering, which has to put the customer at the heart of it. And I would say that for banks to succeed over the next 5 years, they need to be listening to the customer, because it's too easy to change, and there's too many hungry and incredibly talented people in organisations that are coming after them if they take their eye off the ball. But the traditional banks may have taken some time. Some of them are doing it much better than others, but they're fighting back hard, and they've got the resources, and they've got the data available to change things up for the customer. So I only see it as a positive for the customer.
Yeah. Ignore the customer at your peril.
Yeah.
Love it.
Always.
Well, any final words that you have got? And what we'll definitely make sure we do is that we put all of your contact details in the show notes, and a few other bits and pieces. But any final words from you before we sign off? It's been a fascinating session and insights into everything that you do there at DCS. I really appreciate it.
I just want to thank you for having me today. I've always been fascinated about ways to put the customer at the heart of things, and you want to do that because it's good for the customer. But I think that you've demonstrated time and time again that what's good for the customer is ultimately good for your bottom line. And I think as the ability to switch providers and so on it just accelerates. That's never been more true. The customer inertia, I think, is on the way out. It's got to be customer centric from now on.
Love it. So, Rob Windle, DCS, we have loved working with you over the last wee while. Have a great break, the little one that you're having, and look forward to coming back and working much closer with you in the months and years to come. Enjoy, my friend.
Thanks, Glenn. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening into this episode, which is made possible by the team at touchpointgroup.com, the customer intelligence company you can partner with to rapidly translate your customer feedback data into actionable insights that will enable you to prioritize actions that make a demonstrable difference. You'll find a link to their website in the show notes. Thanks again. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and see you soon.